Welcome to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. Online at fppradio.com. So this is the weekly AMA edition of Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. I only have one question this week, but it's a very interesting question, and it actually comes from a female listener. The question is, why are there so many men, or rather, why are there so many more men than women in the liberty movement? Seems like women would be very desirous of greater liberty, what with the history of oppression of women and all. And she actually includes a little bit of a description, because we were actually having a discussion, and then she said, oh, here's a question for the AMA. Asked the question, and then we discussed it a little bit, and there was something that she had written that I wanted to share. So here is the addendum to the question. She writes, I want more women in the movement for two reasons. One, because women need more liberty, and two, so I can have more women to hang out with. The only women I've ever really felt comfortable hanging out with are the ones I've met from the movement. I've always felt more comfortable hanging out with the guys. Even when I was a teen, it's not really socially acceptable for me to go hang out with the guys at my age, and that sucks. So I'm going to try to answer the question, and I'm glad she phrased it the way she did instead of, how can we get more women involved in liberty? And I'm glad she asked the question of why are there more men than women in the movement instead of how can we attract more women? Because that topic has, it's really been beaten to death, and it really boils down to a lot of times people can realize why they're being sort of lobbied or why they're being recruited, if you will. And a lot of times they get turned off. A lot of times women will get turned off, not to the ideas of liberty, but to getting involved with like a liberty group. And a lot of that boils down to a lot of guys are really socially awkward, and they come across, and I hate using this term because I think that it is overly used, creepertarian. I hate using the term, and let me explain why I hate using the term. It's because the term has been broadened to the extent of any libertarian guy that hits on a woman that the woman does not find attractive. So if the lady doesn't find the guy attractive, even if it's something as innocent of, hey, I think you're a very attractive woman, do you want to go to a movie sometime? Then a lot of women, if they don't find the guy attractive, they're, oh, he's a creeper. He's a creepertarian. And it totally, goes away from what the term actually means of, like some guy that actually is almost stalkerish. That's really what creepertarian means, is a libertarian guy that is kind of a stalker. The term creepertarian should not be used to define just any guy that hits on you and you don't find him attractive. But that's part of why there aren't more women, is because, for rightly or wrongly, the larger liberty movement is seen as like an old white guys club. And part of that has to do with the way some guys interact, whether it be, they wind up getting labeled creepertarian, rightly or wrongly. And part of it has to do with people wanting to keep a small tent. Now, some people have argued that I want a small tent liberty movement, and that's not true. I want a small tent libertarian party, and the difference is that the Libertarian Party is, focused specifically on fielding libertarian candidates. big L libertarian, meaning members of the Libertarian Party. And I think that members of the Libertarian Party should also have libertarian ideology. And a lot of people have wanted to broaden the term libertarian to mean basically anything other than Barack Obama or George Bush, depending on which president, was in power at the time that they were making the statement. So you had, a couple of years ago, you had people like Wayne Root who were saying, quote, "I want to redefine libertarianism." That was an actual quote from Wayne Allen Root. And I'm glad that Wayne Root went back to the Republican Party, because Wayne Root was not a small L libertarian. He was libertarian-ish on some issues, but he was not an actual libertarian. So people like that, I'm fine with them, including themselves in liberty events and being involved in the larger liberty movement, but I don't want people like that in the Libertarian Party. And I think because some people, they don't really want to differentiate between Libertarian Party and Libertarian movement, or the libertarian, greater libertarian sphere. I'm not even sure if you could really call it a movement or not. I don't really know a better term to use, so I'll just, call it the larger libertarian movement. So you have, the old white guy syndrome, the people that don't want new people coming in, the people that only want the purest of the pure being involved in their group. And, I'm fine with having somebody that's not 100% libertarian being involved in a liberty group, a larger liberty group of, promote liberty at all cost. So, it's one of those sort of things of, I wish I had a better answer, because I do agree that, you would think that women would be attracted to the ideas of liberty. And I don't know why more women don't get involved. Maybe it's that, the ways that the message are being promoted aren't being promoted effectively enough. And it could just be that they support the ideas, but they don't want to get involved with the groups for reasons that I had mentioned earlier. They don't want to hang around with old white guys. They don't want to hang around with people that they have been told are creepers. They don't want to hang around for whatever reason. And a lot of times, rightly or wrongly, a lot of women don't get along with a lot of other women. So it could have something to do with that, of the women that are involved trying to sort of run off any new women because they don't want competition in their sphere. And I don't know if that's necessarily it, on a large scale. I know that it does happen in, some areas, but again, I don't know how prevalent that is. So hopefully I answered the question. I'm not really sure if I did, but again, hopefully I did. Please let me know if I answered the question. If I didn't, then try to rephrase it. Maybe we'll have the discussion elsewhere instead of me trying to give the answer monologually. There's more. Stay tuned.
You can support FPP Radio by joining the Fans program. Fans are friends, allies, and Numery supporters. Fans help FPP afford to produce more original content. You can join the Fans program for as little as $3 per month or any amount of Bitcoin per month, thanks to the recurring payment options provided by Coinbase. To learn more or to join the Fans program, visit fans.fppradio.com. That's fans.fppradio.com. Hi, I'm Darryl W. Perry, and I need your help to take Peace, Love, Liberty Radio on the road. In the spirit of Motorhome Diaries and Liberty on Tour, I intend to take the message of peace, love, and liberty on the road. I intend to leave New Hampshire at the conclusion of the New Hampshire Liberty Forum and return at the beginning of PorkFest. During the 104-day trip, I'll be visiting at least 10 cities across the country, speaking to people about the ideas of peace, love, and liberty, while continuing to produce daily Liberty media. Pensacola, Florida, Austin, Texas, Sedona, Arizona, and Denver, Colorado are already on the map. If you have a college group, a local Liberty on the Rocks, or other Liberty meetup that you'd like me to visit, you can possibly add your event to my calendar. To find out more about the tour or to donate, visit tour.fppradio.com. That's tour.fppradio.com.
Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. So I've got some interesting news that I want to get into. But first, I want to tell you about Roberts & Roberts Brokerage. For over 35 years, Roberts & Roberts has been a trusted source for buying and selling your investment-grade precious metals. They also take Bitcoin for precious metals purchases and have permanently removed the minimum purchase amount for all orders paid in the digital currency. Call Roberts & Roberts Brokerage today for knowledgeable advice on investing and a forward-thinking approach to new technologies. 850-478-5270 or online at rrbi.co. So, as most of you know, I was in jail over the weekend, which means that it's taken me a couple of days to actually catch up with a lot of the news. And something that happened on Monday that I had heard rumblings about that it was going to be decided by the Supreme Court. Well, there was actually, the ruling came out on Monday. Bill of Rights Day, of all days. And it was a case involving ignorance of the law. Or at least, that's how it was being purported by some, as it was regarding ignorance of the law, and not whether or not you or I could be ignorant of the law, but whether or not police officers, those that are, hired to enforce the law, whether or not they could be ignorant of the law. And, well, in an 8-1 decision, the Supreme Court ruled that, the police have a lot of leeway in whether or not they can be ignorant of the law. There's a story from NPR that I will read, and then I've actually read the entire the entire decision from the Supreme Court, and I have some of, I don't know if you would call them highlights or lowlights from the decision, but let me read the story from NPR first. It says, the U.S. Supreme Court on Monday ruled that police officers don't necessarily violate a person's constitutional rights when they stop a car based on a mistaken understanding of the law. The ruling prompted a lone dissent from Justice Sonia Sotomayor, who warned that the court's decision could exacerbate public suspicion of police in some communities. And now here's background on the case. In 2009, Nicholas Hine, I'm guessing that's how you pronounce the name, it's spelled H-E-I-E-N. So I'm going to pronounce it Hine. Nicholas Hine and a friend were traveling down a North Carolina highway when they were pulled over for having a broken taillight. A subsequent search of the car found a plastic bag containing cocaine. It turns out, though, that the police had no legal right to stop the car in the first place because under North Carolina law, having a single broken taillight is not an offense. Hine contended that just as ordinary citizens cannot claim ignorance of the law as a defense, police can't either, and because the traffic stop was illegal, the evidence from the search that followed should not have been permitted in evidence against him. But the Supreme Court, by an 8-1 vote, ruled that since the officer's mistake was reasonable, it did not violate the Constitution's ban on unreasonable searches and seizures. Writing for the court, Chief Justice John Roberts noted that the keystone of the Fourth Amendment ban on unreasonable search and seizures was the word unreasonable. And in this case, the officer's belief that having a broken taillight was illegal counted as a reasonable mistake. The traffic stop and the subsequent consensual search, and that's key to this, is that it was a consensual search. He agreed to let them search his car, which, in my estimation, was a very big mistake on his behalf. And I would say that it's a very big mistake on anyone's behalf to allow them to do a search. You never want to allow them to do a search, because if you allow them to do a search, then you can't challenge the search. And that's really what's up for decision here, is whether or not the search was reasonable, whether the search should have ever happened. The traffic stop and the subsequent consensual search of the car were therefore also considered reasonable by the court. The maxim, ignorance of the law is no excuse, does not apply here, Chief Roberts maintained, because Hine is not appealing a broken light ticket. He is appealing a cocaine trafficking conviction, as to which there is no asserted mistake of fact or law. So basically, what the court is saying is, well, see, what happened here is you're not challenging the stop, you're challenging the arrest for, well, frankly, you had drugs, and drugs are bad, okay? So, therefore, we can do whatever we want as long as we can arrest you for having drugs. That's really what the court ruled here, is that cops can do pretty much whatever they want as long as they arrest you for drugs, and then, the drug charge will stick. They can throw out anything else, but the drug charge will stick. That's really what's at case here. The article from NPR continues. It says, the decision gives police somewhat more power, but it's hard to imagine that it's a lot, says Professor John Barrett of St. John's University School of Law in New York City. That's because most state traffic laws are both clear and well known. Justice Elena Kagan joined in the majority, but wrote separately to stress that the ruling applies to a small number of, quote, exceedingly rare cases where the law is unclear. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg joined the concurrence. But Sonia Sotomayor, in dissenting, worried about giving police a further fudge factor. Traffic stops can be annoying, frightening, and perhaps humiliating, she observed, and permitting stops based on a mistaken reading of the law has human consequences for communities and their relationships with the police. The perverse effect of permitting police to go ahead with a mistaken reading of the law, she wrote, is to prevent or delay clarification of the law so that the doubt continues to exist in the minds of the public or police about what is and is not legal. And that is basically a summary from NPR. And as I said, I read the entire decision earlier today, and I went through and pulled out some of the highlights and, quite frankly, some lowlights of the case. And let's begin with the majority opinion written by Chief Justice John Roberts. He writes, "But reasonable men make mistakes of law too, and such mistakes are no less compatible with the concept of reasonable suspicion. Reasonable suspicion arises from the combination of an officer's understanding of the facts and his understanding of the relevant law. The officer may be reasonably mistaken on either ground. Whether the facts turn out to be not what he thought, or that the law turns out to be not what he thought, the result is the same. The facts are outside the scope of law. There is no reason under the text of the Fourth Amendment or our precedent why this same result should be acceptable when reached by way of reasonable mistake of fact, but not when reached by similar reasonable mistake of law."
Hi, I'm Darryl W. Perry, and I need your help to take Peace, Love, Liberty Radio on the road. In the spirit of Motorhome Diaries and Liberty on Tour, I intend to take the message of peace, love, and liberty on the road. I intend to leave New Hampshire at the conclusion of the New Hampshire Liberty Forum and return at the beginning of Porkfest. During the 104-day trip, I'll be visiting at least 10 cities across the country, speaking to people about the ideas of peace, love, and liberty, while continuing to produce daily Liberty media. Pensacola, Florida, Austin, Texas, Sedona, Arizona, and Denver, Colorado are already on the map. If you have a college group, a local Liberty on the Rocks, or other Liberty meetup that you'd like me to visit, you can possibly add your event to my calendar. To find out more about the tour or to donate, visit tour.fppradio.com. That's tour.fppradio.com. During the 2013 Porcupine Freedom Festival, Davy Barker presented an idea for a renegade psychological experiment. Since then, he has refined his idea and put his plan and research into writing. He explains, "We aim to show the world beyond a shadow of a doubt that power corrupts absolutely and corrupt authority deserves no obedience." Authoritarian Sociopathy is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
Welcome back to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio, online at fppradio.com. So we're going over the case, or rather the opinion in the case of Hine v. North Carolina, where back in 2009, there was a man by the name of Nicholas Hine who was pulled over for having a broken taillight, which in North Carolina is not illegal to have a single broken taillight. However, the subsequent search of his vehicle, which unfortunately he consented to, was then, it wound up resulting in the police finding some cocaine. He was then charged with trafficking cocaine. Found guilty of that, but of course the broken taillight wound up getting thrown out because, well, it's not illegal to have a single broken taillight in North Carolina. But the way the statute was written, I'll admit, it's a little confusing, but you would think that the people that are hired to enforce the laws would know exactly what the law meant. But in this case, they didn't know exactly what the law meant. And so at case here before the Supreme Court, the court was asked to decide whether or not police can make a stop and a subsequent search on a flawed understanding of the law. The first quote from the decision that I read from Chief Justice John Roberts says that, well, the law and court precedent allows police the leeway of flawed understanding of facts, so therefore it should give them a reasonable exception for reasonable flawed understanding of the law. The next highlight/lowlight from the decision, also written by Chief Justice John Roberts, says an officer may suddenly confront a situation in the field as to which the application of a statute is unclear, however clear it may become later. And now, it's very important to think of this, totally absent of context, because what immediately preceded was the Supreme Court justice saying, well, they may suddenly confront facts and then they have to make a decision. Well, now they may suddenly confront a situation in which the application of the statute is unclear, however clear it may become later. So let's think about a couple of situations that have happened recently that have been in the news, where a police officer in New York City knows for a fact that the use of a chokehold is against department policy, but he applies it anyway to someone who was selling cigarettes. Illegally, but still someone who was selling cigarettes, and that individual wound up dying. Basically, Eric Garner died because a police officer had a flawed understanding of department policy and decided to use a procedure that the department says you are no longer allowed to use. Well, based on the court ruling here, the officer, quote, may suddenly confront a situation in which the application is unclear, however clear it may be later. That could wind up being applied in numerous situations. Basically, anytime a police officer wants to stop someone, they can just claim that, you violated something. Oh, you didn't have your traffic light or your traffic turn signal on for 300 feet, even though statute might not specify how many feet you must have the turn signal on. Or, maybe they do something, like what happened in North Carolina you had a single brake light out and I thought you needed both, so therefore we're just going to do whatever we want. Well, later it gets cleared up and the police officer gets told, well, no, you applied that wrong, but yet the police officer never winds up getting held accountable for applying the law incorrectly. The next highlight/lowlight also comes from the Chief Justice. He writes, finally, Hine and amici, that means the people that filed amicus briefs, being friends of the court. An amicus, basically, it means friend of the court. So Hine and the people that filed the friend of the court petitions point to the well-known maxim, ignorance of the law is no excuse, and contend that it is fundamentally unfair to let police officers get away with mistakes of law when the citizenry is accorded no such leeway. Though this argument has a certain rhetorical appeal, it misconceives the implications of the maxim. The true symmetry is this. He writes, just as an individual generally cannot escape criminal liability based on a mistaken understanding of the law, so too the government cannot impose criminal liability based on a mistaken understanding of the law. If the law requires 2 working brake lights, Hine could not escape a ticket by claiming he reasonably thought he needed only 1. If the law required only 1, the police officer could not issue a valid ticket by claiming he reasonably thought the driver needed 2. Keyword there is a valid ticket. He can issue a ticket. He can do whatever he wants. It's whether or not it stands up in court. So I will continue. It says, just because mistakes of law cannot justify either the imposition or the avoidance of criminal liability, it does not follow that they cannot justify an investigatory stop. So basically, let me reiterate in plain English, the Chief Justice, in the majority opinion, says that just because something will not hold up in court, meaning an invalid parking ticket or an invalid ticket for only having 1 brake light when you only need 1, just because that doesn't hold up in court doesn't mean that anything that happens after the stop isn't going to hold up in court. And, he writes, Hine is not appealing a brake light ticket. He is appealing a cocaine trafficking conviction as to which there is no asserted mistake of fact or law. So the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court dismisses the entire stop, whether the stop should have happened or not, because, the guy was convicted of having drugs, and, drugs are bad, okay? So therefore, drug war means we can do whatever we want. The next lowlight also comes from Chief Justice John Roberts. Because the mistake of law was reasonable, there was reasonable suspicion justifying the stop. Again, reiterating that we can do whatever we want because we're the government and you're not. Might not hold up in court the initial reason for the stop, but we can do whatever we want. Just, get over it, slave. That's basically what the Supreme Court is saying. In the dissenting opinion by Sonia Sotomayor, She writes, giving officers license to effect seizures so long as they can attach to their reasonable views of the facts some reasonable legal interpretation or misinterpretation that suggests a law has been violated significantly expands this authority. She nailed it on the head. And I will post a link to the full opinion so that you can read it for yourself without my commentary, but I'm fairly certain that you will find the same highlights and lowlights as I. This has been Peace, Love, Liberty Radio.